This controversial subject, you have been outspoken in your eagerness to get information for folks, for your constituents, for folks in your home state. You also set up a website where people could submit information on these drone sightings, not just in the Northeast, but from across the country. I wonder if you could take us through some of the tips that you've been getting.
Well, we've been getting, we're focusing, of course, on Jersey, where I live, and where we've seen a surge of drone activity. It's been reported by so many people. What I've said is, listen, I'm willing, given that there's so many bits of information out there, to set up a site where people can send us their information so that I can pass that along to the FBI, the DHS, and of course the Intelligence Committee where I sit, and to the intelligence world, to make sure we get this information shared. You know, the key here is transparency and making sure people know that we're not telling them or insulting them and saying that they're not seeing what they're seeing, but actually explaining to them what they are. This is where I've called on the FBI, Homeland Security, and others to please do a briefing right away, come out, explain to the country and to the people that I represent what they know, right? And that transparency, that information is critically important. And then, of course, to give local law enforcement, and I've got bipartisan legislation to do this, the tools they need to be able to monitor and ensure this isn't the Wild West of drones, right? That actually only the drones that are licensed and should be in the air are in the air. I'm not talking about recreational drones that you have in your backyard, right? As someone puts, you get for the holidays. I'm talking about these large drones that I'm concerned are over military bases, as have been reported, over reservoirs, over critical infrastructure, and over airports. We got to make sure that we keep people safe, but we got to get people information. Otherwise, as you know, people just wonder what's going on.
Yeah, and folks speculate, and I've heard from friends that live in the area that there are a range of theories. Some folks think that it's a foreign operation. One of your fellow New Jersey congressmen suggested that there was an Iranian mothership off the Atlantic coast. What's your hypothesis? What's the most likely scenario of what it is that you're seeing up in the sky at night?
Well, here's what I know. I've been briefed by the FBI and Homeland, reached out multiple times, and feel very good saying that I believe, based on what they know and what they're able to scan, that there's no imminent threat to public safety. That said, what I want to know is more information about where these are all coming from, why the surge in sightings, and obviously I have an Intelligence Committee briefing, as I mentioned, coming up in the next couple hours, and hope to learn more. I feel good about the fact that there's no foreign threats here. That said, I think people should know, well, what is this surge of activity? Where are they coming from? How do we make sure that we monitor the skies properly? I've called for an FAA traffic monitoring of the sky, just like we do at our airports with planes, so we know what's out there and know what's going on. You can't have just people throwing up drones everywhere, these unlicensed, unwelcome drones, and making sure that they're not capturing information or anything else. That's the kind of stuff I want to get to the bottom of. And I want to make sure that they brief the public on. Not put out like a drip of statements. I mean, come out, as the FBI and Homeland Security should, and give a proper public briefing and tell people, answer their questions. So otherwise, you leave a huge vacuum and people will just fill it with their own information. And it's time for them to put out the facts.
But if you get information at that classified briefing that for security reasons you can't share publicly, how do you then go about reassuring folks that there is no imminent threat? Because if you hear from officials there's no imminent threat, but we also have no idea what this is, how sure can you be that there is no imminent threat?
Well, listen, there's certain ways to communicate to the public without specifics. As you know, what I've learned in the classified setting, I can't discuss publicly. However, you'll know information enough that I think, and what I've learned from the FBI and DHS, I believe they can go out publicly with and talk about. And obviously what I learned, based on that, there's ways to communicate with the public without giving all the specifics, but to make people feel better that they shouldn't have to worry when they look at the sky or what's flying overhead. That to me is the most important thing, right? I just want people to not have to worry. And they're seeing stuff. Right? They're sending me stuff. I know they're seeing things. I've heard from local law enforcement that they've seen things with their own eyes. So the bottom line is we've got to address that. We can't just insult people and tell them they're not seeing things. I think that's the wrong answer. And you saw the Secretary of Homeland Security, he came out and said this weekend finally, yes, people are seeing drones, right? Instead of telling people they're not. So, I think the key again here is transparency, information. Don't insult people and tell them they aren't seeing things. Explain to them exactly what's going on. Then I believe people will feel better.
Congressman Josh Gottenheimer, we look forward to hearing what comes of that classified briefing. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.